The Denver Broncos safety position is loaded with depth, and there are a handful of players fighting for those final third, fourth, and maybe fifth spots. Who's it going to be? We'll break it down on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. This is the place to be every single day, all year long. A special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. If you're a brand new viewer and you want to become an everydayer, it's easy. Hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast. That way you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert at predominantlyorange.com.
And our training camp position previews continue as we set the stage for training camp here later on this month, beginning early in Dove Valley, where we know the rookies report on the 16th and the veterans report on the 22nd. The safety position is loaded with depth here going into 2025. It is a room that is healthy right now, and it is a room that I think will have the most impactful back-end depth behind the starters this upcoming season. We'll go through that. Plus, what's the competition look like for the third, fourth, and fifth safety spots that we anticipate the Broncos will carry onto their 53-man roster? More importantly, we'll go through the biggest question surrounding the safety group, which is, can this group stay healthy? We'll dive into all that and more on today's episode of the show. Sayre, let's set the table here. The safety position, the outlook for this position, I think, for the Broncos going into the season. I'm curious to know how you feel about this, because I know when we used to do these shows and these previews back when it was Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, the two solidified starters at this position in place, I didn't feel like we worried too much about this depth. Like, we knew that these guys were Ironmen. They could play, sustainably here in the NFL. You didn't have to worry about them missing time due to injuries. Well, the Broncos are hoping that trend kind of falls in line with this group this upcoming season, because you have Brandon Jones, you add Talanoa Hufanga in NFL free agency. These are going to be your two new starters. Well, Brandon Jones returns, but Talanoa Hufanga, a new starter here for this team. These guys are the top guys, and then everything behind them is very interesting with the depth options that are in place right now.
Dare I say the duo of Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones is actually more physical than the duo of Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, which were mainstays, obviously, from 2019 until 2022, right? I think that was kind of when it kind of fizzled out a little bit more. And so with these two guys, Cody, you have a physical presence. I mean, I think Brandon Jones delivered some of the biggest hits we saw from anybody on the Denver Broncos defense last year. I was shocked to see how physical he was back there, because kind of felt like he was more so known for being a ball hawk on the back end, and he was good for a couple of seasons as a blitzer under Brian Flores with the Miami Dolphins, and so you figured he could play that role. But man, he brought some serious physicality to the position and was fearless out there, which you love to see. And that's kind of the MO for Talanoa Hufanga as well, isn't it? I mean, he's just that heat-seeking missile that, bordering on reckless with the way that he throws his body around out there. And obviously you want to see these guys be able to be the perfect blend of physical, aggressive, but also staying on the field. And yes, you have to stay within the bounds too of what the NFL allows you to do in terms of being physical. And that's where I think these two guys can be huge assets for the Broncos, is they understand the rules that are in place. It's not like they're out there just being dirty, being overly violent. It's a violent game regardless, but these two guys seem to know how to hone their aggressiveness and physicality into the rules of the game to be able to use it to their advantage, as opposed to it being something that you have to worry about on a week-to-week basis.
Well, when we talk about Talanoa Hufanga, I get to use one of my favorite terms when we're describing a player and the way that he plays, right? He's a piss missile with the way that he plays on the football field. I mean, this is a guy who rotates down at the box, blitzes into the A-gap, blitzes off the edge. This is a guy who just thumps people anywhere the football is. He's there. And I feel like if you're an offensive player, you're anxious going into a game against Hufanga, because you're like, man, this guy this guy's everywhere. Like, let me breathe a little bit. Like, if you're a running back, trying to get an outside run, or if you're a wide receiver on a jet sweep, or you're going across the middle, you're just praying that number 29 doesn't hit you, though he's going to be wearing number 9 here for the Denver Broncos this upcoming season. No questions there. Brandon Jones, Hufanga, the solidified starters. But Denver's got quality depth all behind those guys right here, and it starts with P.J. Locke, followed by J.L. Skinner, Delarian Turner-Yell, veteran Sam Franklin Jr., and you have a guy like Keidron Smith, who made the 53-man roster last season after a very impressive preseason performance by him, and Devon Key as another name there. This is a room that is loaded with guys, and really for Sean Payton, he said the biggest key when I asked him this offseason program, what do you want to see from those guys? He says, well, it's hard to make, an NFL roster in the 53 if you're not starting at safety and you're not playing special teams. So that's the key right there. Whoever emerges as the better special teams providers here for Darren Rizzi, I think will make up that 3rd, 4th, and 5th spot at the safety position, though I know we're going to dive deeper into that as the show goes on here today. But let's go through the names here that we kind of discussed. I mean, Sayre, how do you kind of see this shaping out here for the Broncos?
Well, I like the duo that you have at the top. Obviously, you feel like those guys could potentially be the best starting safety duo in the NFL with Hufanga and Jones. But then behind them, you've got a guy who has a ton of experience in P.J. Locke. And there was some discussion earlier in the offseason amongst the media and the people like me who write these kind of articles. Like, you try to follow the breadcrumbs, and you felt like P.J. Locke could potentially be a cut or trade candidate based on his salary this year and the lack of guaranteed money on his contract left. But obviously the Broncos want to prioritize having a guy like that as a depth option because of the fact that you do have a couple of I don't want to say injury prone players, but guys who have been injured or struggled with injuries. Even last year, Brandon Jones struggled at times. And we saw over the year that position group in particular was sort of exposed as the season went along, especially late in the year. And so you want to have quality depth and you want to have young guys that you believe in. I feel like the Broncos have the best combination of that, right? They have a guy like J.L. Skinner, who, everybody in Broncos country felt like he was the steal of that 2023 draft class. We get questions all the time and comments all the time. Like, what's the progress update on J.L. Skinner? How's J.L. Skinner looking at practice? Everybody wants to know. He's like that unicorn at the position, a 6'4" rare type of safety who he's got some ball skills. He's got some range. He can do a lot of different things with his physicality. But man, to take the next step in his game would be huge for this Denver defense. So you almost feel like the Broncos, just not quite to the same degree, but you've got a bit of an embarrassment of riches at the safety position, which is essential, I think, in today's NFL when you're going up against teams that have so many good receivers, so many good athletic options at tight end, and then running backs out of the backfield who can catch passes as well.
Well, I think when you look at the list of names there that we've all talked about there, you mentioned PJ, JL, Devon Key, Sam Franklin Jr., Delarian Turner-Yell, Keidron Smith. I mean, you're going to have extensive competition, which we'll highlight here in a minute, but I feel like it raises the overall ceiling and maybe the floor of that room here for the Broncos in terms of, all right, we know no matter how this plays out, we feel like we have quality depth behind guys like Talanoa Hufanga, behind guys like Brandon Jones. We have guys that we feel like can step in and play. And look, Devon Key's got some starting experience to his belt, and so does some of these other guys. Sam Franklin Jr., I think his only interception of his career where he got some defensive snaps, I think it was a 99-yard pick six. I think it was against Kirk Cousins, if I'm not mistaken, but I have to go back and fact check that. But I know he did have a 99-yard pick six against somebody, and some of the limited action he stepped on the field for defensively throughout his NFL career here. But how is this competition behind Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga going to play out here this upcoming season? We're going to dive deep into what players like PJ Locke, JL Skinner, Devon Key, and others need to do to solidify themselves those spots. And we'll share our predictions as to who those final 3 safeties will be here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. Broncos Country. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you all know, FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook, and summer sports are in full swing. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach.
There's a lot of regular season baseball games, all right? We get 162 games, but with FanDuel, makes regular season games feel like must-watch events, and it's easy to use and very fast to pay out. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Will the Denver Broncos keep 4 or 5 safeties this year? And how do they differentiate between those guys who are going to be on the team behind the starting duo of Talanoa, Hufanga, and Brandon Jones this coming season? Broncos Country, it's a great time to be excited about a Denver defense that could be the best it's had in a decade. This Denver Broncos defense is loaded. And part of what makes a great defense so great, Cody, we all know this, it is depth. I mean, you have to have a great starting group, but you have to have guys that can step up in time of need, right? And the Broncos back in the Super Bowl 50 days, they had that as well, especially at the safety position. You know, they had depth and they had guys who could step up in a pinch. They had guys who could play great special teams. That's what you need to make a great roster in today's NFL. And the Broncos have outstanding depth at the safety position. The question becomes, when you're doing roster gymnastics, do you keep 4 guys? Do you keep 5 guys? What differentiates all those players? Where do you even begin with this conversation? I think obviously PJ Locke leads the way in terms of those backup guys or the guys who you feel like could start for you in a situation that calls for it. What do you think is that key for anybody that's competing for one of these 3 spots? And is it 3 spots?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is going to be 3 spots that are really open here for the taking for the Broncos. And, how many they keep at cornerback is also going to be deciding factors, because usually sometimes we see anywhere between 11 to 12 total players between both of those position units make the 53-man roster. So is it going to be 6 cornerbacks this upcoming season compared to 5 safeties? Could it be 6 and 6 potentially? I mean, it really just depends on what Denver may want to do with that extra roster spot that they used last year on Zach Wilson as the extra QB on the 53-man roster. Could that go to defense? Could that go to offense? Kind of up in the air. I feel like safety would be a great position to maybe have one of those extra guys because of special teams here. You mentioned that depth about Super Bowl 50 and the guys that they had there. Obviously, we know the TJ Ward, Darian Stewart. They had David Bruton. They also had a guy in Josh Bush in the mix as well, Omar Bolden. And then eventually down the stretch, it was Shiloh Ko coming onto the roster as well, which was wild here. But as pertains to PJ, he's got the previous starting experience. He's shown that he can be a starter here in the NFL. He's shown that he can be an effective blitzer, especially from the slot when they bring him down. I mean, how many times did we see him make a big play? I mean, he should have called game there against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets on week 4, had that 4th down sack there, and then Denver kind of screwed everything up after that, but barely held on to win against the Jets. We've seen him come up with big sacks against guys like C.J. Stroud, like PJ has been. And I think also at times throughout his career in the last 3 years, Sayre, we've seen PJ make some clutch plays for the Broncos. The game-winning interception against the Green Bay Packers back in 2023. We saw the peanut punch in 2022 against the San Francisco 49ers that helped the Broncos win that game. What was it, 11-10? Like, PJ is a clutch player, but he's also grown on a year-to-year basis. And he's kind of got this sour rap in the eyes of a lot of the fan base last season. I think PJ played a lot better than people thought. But the Broncos obviously wanted to upgrade at that position, or they're maybe looking to challenge the younger guys because they want to see a lot here out of J.L. Skinner, who they want to take the next step this upcoming season, whether it be as a dime linebacker, whether it be as a big nickel player in certain packages. JL is the type of player that could be a little bit of a weapon here defensively, depending on what opponent you're playing and the style of offense that they have. I think a team like the Philadelphia Eagles might be the opportunity here for a guy like J.L. Skinner to see more playing time, but PJ's been a proven guy. Does PJ compete with him for that role? What about Devon Key, who stepped in as a starter for the Broncos last season and really outside of the Baltimore game did a really good job filling in? That to me is also another question. And you got guys like Delarian Turner-Yell, who's really, he was more of a guy that got some starting reps early on. That was really his kind of first starting action in the NFL. Came in that Miami Dolphins game where the Broncos gave up 70 points. And I think that soured a lot of the Broncos country's perception of Turner-Yell, but I'd say that he's a young player who's continuing to ascend, contributed on special teams. And then you also have Keidron Smith, who was an impressive young ball hawk as well. And so for me, so much of this is going to boil down to how many guys Denver decides to keep, which I think are going to be 3 additional guys behind Jones and Hufanga. To me, I feel like Skinner and a guy like PJ Locke, I feel like these guys are locks here for the roster, with that final spot really kind of being up for grabs here.
And that's where I would ask the question, and I want to know your opinion on this. Like, what percentage chance would we give Sam Franklin, who the team signed, knowing that he is that special teams ace? He's a guy that's the evaluation on him. Like you said, he had the pick 6 off Kirk Cousins. That's really the only play of note that he's made, and that's a notable play. It's a big play, but that was a couple years ago, and he doesn't play a ton of defense. He was brought into Denver to play special teams, so where do you put the percentage chance if you had to do it today on why do you sign a guy like that? You sign him to come and play special teams. Is that a Tremont Smith type of move, or is this more of a let's see what he can do in the preseason games and let's give him a try, as opposed to we're signing a guy that we know is going to be part of our core special teams?
I feel like I'm going to have to see a little bit more, just because didn't see much in the offseason program that really kind of stood out to me. Granted, the pads aren't on, right? And that kind of skews a little bit of the early on evaluation stuff. So I think at training camp and preseason, we really are going to find out. But I would have put his chances above a guy like Devon Key, who, in my opinion, was a very important special teams player for the Broncos last year, was a core 4 guy. He had the important role of personal protector, which, if you know and you study, that gunner and personal protector on punt team are some of the most important positions in the game on special teams. And I like some of the things that we saw from him on the defensive side of the ball last season. So that, to me, I would kind of put the advantage right now, at least going into camp, with Devon Key kind of being ahead. But then a Keidron Smith. I mean, is Keidron going to be a guy who, once again, just balls out in the preseason and makes it a little undeniable case to say, hey, like, I'm getting takeaways? I think he had 4 interceptions in 3 games last year, or it was 3. It was 3 and 3, or it was 4 and 3. It was one or the other, but he had takeaways, and that's what secured him a roster spot here for that depth. To me, I think the favorite right now going into camp is going to be Devon Key behind, obviously, PJ Locke and JL Skinner.
Yeah, I could see that being the case as well, especially because that these Broncos coaches, coaches have to love the guys who come up out of nowhere, or they were signed to reserve future contract. Like, as much as you want to say, Sean Payton takes the logos off the helmets during the offseason and you slap a player's name on his helmet, I don't know that has anything to do with necessarily like your roster chance. I think that's just more of like hey, everybody is in the same boat here. Like, none of us is nobody's a Bronco just yet. That's kind of the vibe that I get from it, right? Is like, it's official that you're a Bronco.
Earn your stickers.
Logo. Yeah, you earn your sticker there. And so I know that he likes that everybody's in the same boat type of mentality. And I can't help but feel like coaches have a little bit of a bias towards guys like that, who they worked their way up. They weren't big free agent signings. They weren't drafted. They were written off. Like, you can't help but think they almost look at guys like that a little bit differently and sort of, secretly root for them to be the ones who make the team. And if it's close, to me, Cody, I think you go with the guy that you believe has more upside in the longer term. That's how PJ Locke has stuck around as long as he has. I feel like the coaches have seen, okay, the upside is there. He could contribute in this way. He just needs growth in this area. He needs confidence in this area. That's where those undrafted, unheralded guys are going to get the nod over more proven guys, because coaches and scouts are saying, this guy has a little bit more potential. So if you feel like it's a toss-up, give it to the younger guy with more potential, who might have less experience.
And I remember asking Sean Payton last offseason program right before training camp about Devon Key, and he went into kind of great detail about why, he's a player that's really impressed. Like, he stood out. He's doing all the things right in the playbook. Like, Devon Key showed that. Like, that, what Sean Payton said, Devon Key went out there, I think, in the preseason and in the regular season, because of his role that he had. I think he proved Sean right in that evaluation, right? Because you never want to be the coach that says something about a guy and then he fizzles out and doesn't do anything, right? And gets cut and doesn't make the roster. Devon is a guy who works extremely hard, and this is a guy who I think has grown so much in the couple of years I've gotten to see him in that locker room. He's going to be a guy I think that's the unquestioned favorite right now. I know we mentioned the tie about like Sam Franklin Jr. and Trent Sherfield, but Sayre, if they're going to keep Trent Sherfield as an extra guy because of special teams, why not do that and have a guy like Chris Abrams-Drain, like guys you need that that are going to be on this roster that you need to play special teams take up those snaps. And that's, like I said, J.L. Skinner's going to still play special teams. If PJ Locke makes the roster, he's going to play special teams. Same thing for Devon Key. If he makes the roster, he's going to play special teams. Do it to guys that are actually going to have a chance to play on special teams, but also have more of a chance to play on defense, where I think Devon Key just has the advantage over everybody else right now at this point. Look, Broncos Country, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the safety position? Do you think they'll carry 2 additional safeties or 3 additional guys on this roster going into the regular season? And if so, who are those names? Share that with us here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. But the biggest question surrounding the Broncos and the safety position has everything to do with health. Can this unit stay healthy? We'll debate and discuss here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Health is paramount in the National Football League, and the Broncos safety position is one that will be under the microscope this upcoming season, especially as training camp approaches here in just about a week and a half here. Broncos Country, we appreciate you so much for tuning in, rocking with us here. This is the theme, and I'd say as we look at these training camp position previews, we're always ending our shows by asking the biggest question about these position rooms. And I think when we look at safety right now, the biggest one here, Sayre, when you look at all the names involved here, can this group stay healthy? That is the question. I think when you look at guys like Hufanga, J.L. Skinner, PJ Locke, Brandon Jones, if you look at their 2024 season, all these guys had 16 missed games combined between them due to injury. This is a position group that if the Broncos defense is going to be successful this upcoming season and live up to those expectations that people have of them, they have to stay healthy, especially at safety.
They do, and I wonder where you set the over-under in terms of the number of games that you figure you're going to get out of all these guys. I mean, that's kind of an unfair thing to do at this point in the year. You hope for – go ahead.
I was going to say, do we do it based on like if the names that I just mentioned with the starters and the key backup guys that we anticipate, if that was 16 games missed last year, is that where we set it, like over under 16 games between all of those guys combined?
That's tough. I mean, maybe that is, and I would hope that we get the under. Obviously, you want to see these guys on the field. I mean, if the Broncos can, maybe we flip that question too a little bit and to say if the Broncos get 14 or more games out of the combination of Hufanga and Jones, do they then have multiple All-Pro safeties? Because if these guys are able to stay on the field, I think that they're going to be extremely productive. Now, the only way that I can see this going south is if Hufanga misses a bunch of time or Jones misses a bunch of time and one guy's playing a role that, well, he's playing this role because Jones is hurt or because the other guy's hurt. I think that's where you get into a little bit of a pickle. Not because they can't play those roles, but because you want to maximize the duo being out there and them both doing what they do best at all times. So I think there is a symbiotic relationship between a safety duo. And I also think that there's value in having a player like we saw Jones thrive last year. And he was the most consistent guy at safety the Broncos have. But I think having Hufanga next to him or out there with him is going to make him that much better. So to me, I think if you can get 14 or more games out of both of these guys this year, I think that you have a good chance of having two, not saying first team All-Pro. I'm saying like one of the top 8 safeties or top 4 safeties in the NFL. I think you could have 2 guys with that distinction.
Well, I think you certainly said it earlier. I think you could also have the potential to have one of the best safety duos in all of the NFL. You know, we've seen some changes in the offseason from several teams out there that have made some changes to their defense. I think it's a perfect time for these guys. If Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga can at least play 16 games each, or even 14, that's tough. I know it's a 2-game difference from 16, but those things can make a big difference, right? And also, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, our over-under between all these guys, if we had it at 16, it could drastically be impacted if one guy misses a large portion of the time, right? One guy can miss like 12 games, and it really throws off the entire sample size here. So that'd be a hard question to ask here. Maybe another question we can use here at the safety position I think about is how can the addition, because we saw it with Brandon Jones last year. Brandon was I would say a tremendous surprise just because we didn't know what we were going to see from him, especially because he didn't practice all of training camp because he had an injury, didn't play in the preseason. Our first look at Brandon Jones in a Broncos uniform came against the Seattle Seahawks, and we're like, wow, okay, this guy, He's everywhere. He could play. We saw it in Tampa Bay, intercepting Baker Mayfield. Okay, this guy can play. What does he have? He has a fumble recovery in that same game. Oh, all right. Brandon Jones, great signing there by George Payton, Sean Payton. Hufanga, we've seen the sample size of him. When healthy, this guy is one of the best hard-hitting safeties in the NFL. My question here, with this in consideration, we'll put an asterisk on this. These guys staying healthy, how much does Talanoa Hufanga elevate this safety room and also elevate really this Broncos defense, looking at the pieces at inside linebacker and also the secondary, maybe even the defensive line, because you almost have to, if you're going to be in the box as a safety, you're going to have that symbiotic relationship with having to know which way your defensive line is going to stunt so you don't blitz the wrong hole. That, to me, I think is another big question here.
I think it has the potential to be that type of move that at the end of the year, people in the NFL media are saying like this was the best move any team made defensively, and really not a lot of people talked about it. I know that there was the initial buzz after he signed in Denver and, leaving the 49ers. He's a former second team All-Pro. And Sean Payton acknowledged that part of the reason why the Broncos were able to get the guys they did in free agency, it's no secret. It's because they've had injuries. And he said, like, they probably wouldn't have hit free agency if they didn't have the injuries. So you take those kind of calculated risks. But if Hufanga is on the field, like we saw, the 49ers defense was outstanding when he was out there, constantly around the ball, constantly causing havoc. There's a saying that I love to use, Cody, just like yours. I love to talk about a guy who's like a bat out of hell. It just seems like he causes chaos, and there's it's a controlled chaos, though, with a guy like him. Like, he seems like he's just kind of flying all over the field with reckless abandon, and yet it's with intention. He's always around the football. He makes it feel like your defense has 12 guys, and he's just that type of impact player that could take this Denver defense from sputtering to third in points allowed last year to establishing itself atop the NFL as the number one defense. That's the kind of impact that I think he can make in creating turnovers, in shutting down drives, in stopping plays in the red zone, at doing everything, at creating more 3 and outs. I think Hufanga is that guy that if he stays healthy, he takes Denver's defense to that level that we didn't see them get to last year.
Which I think in today's game, man, it's so hard when you factor in all the rules that favor the offense. And you look at a guy like Hufanga and how physical he plays. It's almost kind of like this fine line. Like, the game, I feel like, has transitioned over the last handful of years. Kareem Jackson is an ironic example here. But the way Kareem played when Kareem first came into the NFL, I would even say when Kareem was a member of the Houston Texans and he blew up Phillip Lindsay, and maybe even his first year in Denver, the way that Kareem played used to be encouraged. It was encouraged because it's just physical. It is violent. It is dominant. It's not dirty, but it's violent in a sense because of the physicality aspect of it. Whereas in today's NFL, Sayre, anytime we see someone get hit really hard, even if it's with the shoulder to a shoulder or shoulder to a chest, what do we see? A yellow flag. And I feel like that has a chance to creep into the minds of hard-hitting players like Hufanga and saying, hey, you have to change the way that you play because you hit guys too hard. Well, you're going to get flagged for it. And even if it's not dirty, you're going to get fined probably $45,000 for being too physical. That, to me, is where I have such a frustration. I feel like it's so hard for these guys that play the positions like that. That's something I'm eager to see how it maybe plays out here for the Broncos. And a little bit of a note here. We were talking about Kareem a little bit. He's on the Broncos. I don't know if it's an internship, but he's been with the Broncos this offseason through the entire offseason program and kind of like this player personnel role here with George Payton. So I think that's kind of cool here. I remember seeing Kareem. I was like, wait a minute. I don't remember anything happening. I don't remember an announcement of that, but I saw Kareem. I was like, hey, that's K-Jack. Okay, there we go. So we'll see how things are going here, obviously, with that. And I wonder what Kareem's thoughts would be on the additions of Talanoa Hufanga and obviously what Brandon Jones was able to do now that he's in a role with the team that he used to play for. Interesting thoughts here. But Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your thoughts here on this training camp position preview on the safety position for you everydayers. Here's what you can expect. Tomorrow's episode, Sayre and I, we're going to take a look at the Broncos wide receiver room. And while Sean Payton said roster spots aren't necessarily up for grabs, touches are. Who can get the most touches this upcoming season behind Courtland Sutton? We'll debate and discuss that on tomorrow's episode, Locked on Broncos.